A reading from the book of Job. Then God answered Job from the heart of the storm. Who is this obscuring my plans with such ignorant words? Hitch up your belt like the fighter you are. Now I will ask the questions and you will answer me. Where were you when I created the earth? If you know the answer, tell me. Who decided its size? Do you know? Who stretched the measuring line across it? Into what foundation were its pillars sunk? Who laid the cornerstone while all the choruses of morning stars sang and the heavenly court shouted for joy? And who held back the sea behind partitions when it burst forth from my womb? When I created clouds as the earth's raiment and thick darkness as its swaddling clothes? When I drew limits around the waters and locked the partitions in place and said, this far and no more, this is where your mighty waves stay. Have you ever in your life commanded the morning or told the dawn that its assignment for the day was to grasp the edges of the earth and shake out its wicked? When the dawn lightens things to a clay red, like a garment dyed to a brighter colour, the wicked are denied the light, and their threatening arms are broken. Have you travelled as far as the source of the sea, or walked in search of the abyss? Have you discovered the gates of death? Have you seen the gates of the place of darkness? Do you comprehend the breadth of the earth? If so, address the following. How does one get to the source of light? And where does darkness come from? Could you walk them home? Do you know where they live? If you do know, you were born when they were, so you must be very old. For ancient wisdom, we give thanks.
The poem Grace, interrupted by Miko Harvey. There was once a planet who was both sick and beautiful. Chemicals rode through her that she did not put there. Animals drowned in her eyeballs that she did not put there. Animals she could not warn against the falling in because she was one of them, not separable from them. Define sick, the atmosphere asked. So she tried. She made a whale on fire, somehow still swimming and alive. See, she said, like that? Kind of. But the atmosphere did not understand this, so the planet progressed in her argument. She talked about the skin that snakes shed, about satellites that circled her like suitors forever, yet never said a word. She talked about the shyness of large things, how a blueberry dominates the tongue that it dies on. She talked, and the atmosphere started nodding. You could call this a revolution, or just therapy. Meanwhile, the whale spent the rest of his life burning, etc., etc. He sang a few songs. When he finally died, his body, continuing to burn steadily, drifted down to the ocean floor. And although the planet had long since forgotten him, he was merely one of her many examples. He became a god, kind of god, in the eyes of the fish that saw him as he fell. Or not a god exactly, but at least something inexplicable, something strange and worth briefly turning your face toward. For wisdom in contemporary poetry, we give thanks.
Holy One, creating us and all that is, breathe in my lips and speak through them. Come to our minds and think through them. Take our hearts and set them on fire with love for you, now and forever. Amen. In his tender and tantalizing work, Annam Cara, John O'Donoghue writes, "The way you look at things is the most powerful force in shaping your life." Think about that. The way you look at things is the most powerful force in shaping your life. So I want to talk today about 3 different ways of looking at things suggested by our readings today. The microscopic, that allows us to appreciate our own smallness and uniqueness. The telescopic, that invites us to move imaginatively towards universes beyond this one. And the cosmic, that calls us to a yet bigger story. Because story is critical. And it is only through story, through the power of imagination, that we shall be able to effect the extraordinary changes required by our current ecological crisis. So let's take a moment to tell the story of right here, right now. I'm going to invite you to plant your feet on the floor. And just to take a deep breath in and a breath out. And as you breathe out, to ground down through the layers of the church floor, the carpet, the floorboards, all the layers of the building, to connect to earth. Aboriginal people have connected to earth for tens of thousands of years. And they can help us with this connection. That's one reason they need a voice. But even they are only a tiny part of the story that brings us here today. For 13.8 billion years, our Earth has been evolving. From molten rock to opera. From swirling gases to artificial intelligence. So as you connect your feet to earth, this is our evolving story. But then realize that only gravity is keeping your feet on the earth. And that your head, my head, all our heads are sticking down, in Australia, down into deep space. All of us are like pins on a pincushion, sticking out and whirling through space at about 30 kilometers per second. There are 100 billion galaxies in the universe to our existing knowledge, each with 100 billion stars. And our galaxy, the Milky Way, is traveling through space at a speed of 2.1 million kilometers per hour. Are you feeling giddy yet? Maybe let that practice go. Are you feeling very, very tiny yet? I really do hope so, because that certainly gives us perspective when we start to get worked up about whatever is worrying us this week. It's the kind of perspective that the author of the book of Job sought to provide in their own day. Now, we may not be over happy with the so-called answer to Job of which we heard a part today. We may feel that as an answer to the kinds of human suffering that Job was enduring, the kinds of human suffering we see across our globe this morning, it's somewhat lacking in what we might want to call compassion. The author would probably have failed Pastoral Care 101. But what that does is helps Job and us as readers to reframe what is going on with some small appreciation of the vastness and mystery that we're dealing with. According to the author of the book of Job, the voice of God asks, "Where were you when I created the earth? Have you commanded the morning since the days began? Have you seen the gates of deep darkness?" Well, no, Job has not, and nor have we. We are only now beginning to be able to acknowledge that 96% of the universe is dark. Now, the mystics apprehended this ahead of the scientists. "The ground of the soul is dark," wrote Meister Eckhart in the 13th century. But essentially, our view has been and largely continues to be anthropocentric. We're concerned with ourselves and the survival of our species. And as a species, we continue to be very self-interested in our use and abuse of the resources of our planet, with very little regard to the much larger evolving story of the universes of which we are an infinitesimally tiny part. Tiny, but not insignificant. Tiny things have impact, as anyone who's been in bed with a mosquito knows very well. God gives to us, as they gave to Job, an ability to see the world from a God's eye perspective and to delight in its beauty and freedom as God does. As human beings, we have a humble but important part to play in the evolution of the whole cosmos. As Brian Swimmy expresses it, we are seamlessly woven into the universe. We are beautiful, sacred, earth universe in human form, just as a flower is earth universe in flower form. And when we look at a flower, we are looking at the whole universe in flower form, and the flower looks back at us and sees the whole universe in human form, because we are made of the same stuff. We are all stardust. We are all earth creatures. We are, as Thomas Berry reminds us, a communion of subjects, not a collection of objects. And hence, as he says, to tell the story of anything is to tell the story of everything. And that's why we need a telescopic view. Which brings us to imagination. If we're to tackle the issues of global boiling, climate crisis, ecological catastrophe, we are going to need our God-given powers of imagination to conceive of our planet and our place in the cosmos on a much larger scale. As the condemned and exiled Catholic priest Teilhard de Chardin recognized years ago, the fragments of the world seek each other so that the world may come into being. And the artificial separation between the human and the cosmos is at the root of our contemporary moral confusion. How do we heal that artificial separation between the human and the cosmos? Nagging and moralizing will not change people's minds and hearts. Education will only take us a little way. Getting out there with a banner and protesting will help and must be done. But it will not be enough. It will not be enough because we have a spiritual problem, a God problem, that we can only address by using our imaginations to tell a different story, imagine a new way, create a new chain of events. Now, I don't know what you made of today's contemporary reading that Hazel brought to us so beautifully. Meko Harvey's poem, The Poem Grace Interrupted, I found very hard to understand with my rational thinking mind. And the poet wrote about it, I wrote this poem while walking down the street one night in Midtown Manhattan. Being at the base of all those tall buildings somehow turned my imagination planetary. I think the poem shows just a few links in a chain of accidents. Somebody hurt somebody else while trying to heal herself. Somebody becomes an idol to others who don't understand their particular hurt, and the atmosphere nods along acceptingly. The type of little chain that probably happens every day among children on playgrounds at recess. Well, my rational mind's still struggling a bit, but my heart knows what he's talking about the ways one little thing impacts another, about the chain reactions, good and bad. The poem suggests that we are delightfully, awkwardly, heartbreakingly entangled with each other, with the environment we inhabit, and with the psychological environments that inhabit us. The poet Harvey, in the manner of magical realism, takes us to a place that is at once fabulous and yet wholly realistic and recognizable. It's the world we know, but not as we know it. So whether in his terms it's an animal sucked into the eyeball of the planet, or a whale on fire that in sinking to the ocean depths inspires devotion, we recognize, don't we, our planet, beautiful yet sick. And through the power of imagination, we're invited to do something about that. John O'Donoghue, in talking about imagination, reminds us the linear mind, despite its sincerity and commitment, can totally miss the gift. The imagination, in its loyalty to possibility, often takes the curved path rather than the linear way. So can we take the risk, at least in our prayer, in our quiet moments, of opening ourselves to the curved path, to extraordinary possibility, especially the possibilities opened up by love. For as Joanna Macy put it, our task is to fall in love with the earth again, embodied in everyone and everything that is. For we will not hurt that which we truly love. By the exercise of our wide lens, our broad imagination, can we help ourselves and others to fall in love once again? Can we tell a different story? because the collective story that we are separate from nature and superior to it has brought us to the brink of destruction. And Christian ideas of subduing the earth are a part of an unhelpful story. It's a story that allowed Christians in 2019 in America to declare that refusing to use fossil fuels hurts God's feelings. How did we get there? We have to tell a different story. And any new story will need to be amplified by the storytellers. And that is us. That's us. Others across the scientific community and the green movement have stories they can tell. But as people of faith, we are responsible for telling the yet bigger story. We're responsible for looking through the lens of love and telling the cosmic story that binds us to mysteries well beyond our power to speak and yet enacted in our very selves. This is our unique calling, a call we're only just beginning to recognize, for indeed, God is always calling us into the future, always ahead of us, co-creating our lives. Now, I suspect most of us would like an easier call. Let's just try some small actions of love towards our fellow human beings and other creatures with whom we share this extraordinary planet. Because that's hard enough, and too hard for most of us, even on the best of days. And it's certainly a place to begin. Yet let us dare, in the grace of God, for it is the grace that interrupted Miko Harvey's poem, his making, that's what a poem is, a making. Let us, in the gift and grace of God, dare to imagine and tell a story of a love so irresistible, so potent in its action, so tender in its care, that every atom, every cell of our universe will respond for good. Let us indeed imagine, as Teilhard de Chardin once did, that the day will come when, after witnessing space, the winds, the tides, and gravitation, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we shall have discovered fire. Amen.